All right, well, hello everyone. Thank you for hanging around and sticking around with us. I'm Mark Vernazza, the Director of Media and Telco Partnerships for the Wall Street Journal Barron's Group. And I wanted to say thank you, Brand Innovators, and for everyone who's participated over the last few days. There's been some really great and thought-provoking conversations, so thank you. So I'm thrilled to be introducing Nicole McNamara, who works across the innovation consulting practice for Salesforce as Vice President of Ignite Americas. Today, we'll be delving into the current state of marketing. We'll be talking about customer experience as well as transformation strategies, how to work within the C-suite, and then we'll look towards the future for some marketing trends. There'll be a short Q&A, so if there's any questions that do come up, please hold those thoughts, and we'll make sure we'll be able to take them. I think we can get through probably a question for everyone.
I'm worried. I'm immediately worried we're not going to get through everything, guys.
So, Nicole, I've been with the Journal for 11 plus years, and I've seen a lot of change and transformative change and also progress across the media industry. I'm very passionate about working with partners that I serve and also building long-lasting relationships. Could you talk to us a little bit about your role and what the consulting arm Ignite is at Salesforce and some of your responsibilities?
Yeah, sure. First of all, how's everybody doing? Is this the last conversation before cocktails and dinner? There's one more. Oh, goodness. Do we want to get them in here? We could do this together. Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here, and welcome to Vegas, everybody. So I have the real privilege and joy of leading a team called Ignite at Salesforce. And it's going to sound like one of those terrible jokes, but I'll tell you how we got started. About 9 years ago, Mark Benioff, our CEO. Anybody familiar with Mark Benioff? Yes? Okay, he's kind of been in the news. So he sat across from a bunch of CEOs that we were doing a lot of work with, much bigger, complicated companies than Salesforce was at the time. And he said to them, you know, we're doing all this work with you, but it feels like we could do something different. It feels like we could take it to the next level and have a different kind of a conversation. And a CEO from a very large brand, a CPG brand, said, I want Salesforce to bring me innovation the way that Salesforce does it. And could you do that? To which Mark said, yes, we can, and turned to my former boss and said, could you make that happen? And thus, Ignite was born. And the real reason why we exist is to help our customers, our Salesforce customers, have better relationships with their customers, with their partners, with their employees. And there's a lot of people at Salesforce who can talk to you about tech and capabilities and architecture, but there are very few at Salesforce who can talk to you about the people and the kinds of important relationships we need to have with those people to drive digital transformation and kind of future-proof our business. So that's what my team does. We are a small but mighty team. In a company of 80,000, there's only about 200 of us globally. So we have to be very strategic about the kinds of investments we make into our customers. But I happen to think I have the best job at the best company.
That sounds great. And just to conceptualize it a bit further, do you have any examples of a partner that you've worked with and how you've collaborated with them?
Welcome to the front seat, Johnny. Yes, we have, one of the great things about working at Salesforce is there's a lot of companies that want to work with us. And so I heard IHG, I think they were up here a few seconds ago. We've done work with them. We've done work with Marriott, some of the work that we did with Ford. We are launching some work that we've done at Qualcomm here today at CES. So we have this really amazing opportunity to work with C-suites in some of our biggest customers and our biggest companies out there across all sorts of industries.
That's great. And shifting a little bit, each year Salesforce produces a State of the Marketing report, and this past November, the 8th edition dropped. So I wanted to see if you could talk to us about some of the key insights in that report and some of the priorities and also challenges that you see marketers facing.
Yeah. Who's read this report? Anybody? Page turner on your bedside table? Okay, we'll make sure you guys get a copy of it. Yeah, it's an interesting time to be in marketing, I would say. You know, as I think about, my background is actually in marketing. My master's degree is in marketing. It is kind of core of what I believe. And one of the things in all of the C-suites that we exist in and all of the boardrooms we're in, I don't see marketing there a whole lot. I don't see CMOs there enough. And so it's something that has always kind of bothered me about what we're doing and about the kind of changes that companies want to undergo. You got to have marketing at that table. But it's a tough time to be marketing. First of all, it is hard because nobody is at the table There's a lot of us in marketing that are women, and we are still struggling to get a seat at the table. There is a lot of conversation. It reminds me of what used to be going on with the CEO or the CTO or the CIO. A few years ago, when everyone thought, well, those are the people that keep the lights on and the phones running and the laptops going, right? And now they are the people driving business challenges and driving business outcomes for organizations. Marketing has that same moment ahead of them, is my belief. But it's not easy, and there's a wide expectation set for marketing. The other thing is that, and this is not surprising to anyone who works in this field, our expectations as consumers are changing rapidly, and they are changing faster than the vast majority of companies can keep up with them. But I will say that one of the things in the report that I was really surprised by was how resilient marketing is and how resilient marketers are. And one of the things that in that report talks about 70% of marketing and 70% of CMOs that we surveyed have a plan for their AI strategy. Like, that's unheard of. That used to be the responsibility of a CTO or a CIO. People couldn't even spell AI, and now CMOs and marketers are having a plan for that. One of the things I used to say at former employers was, hashtag, I don't know, go ask marketing. And that has become true over the pandemic. And I don't know that everybody has gotten their full due on how important the decisions that marketing made have been. They were the ones who had to pivot to hybrid events. They're the ones who everybody says, what's an NFT? And can someone tell me exactly what that is, right? How do you spell NFT? And so their influence is much broader, and their ability to think about the business is very different. But it is going to require a different mindset in the C-suite in order to get them at the table in a different way.
Yeah, and I agree. Coming from historically the sales side throughout my career, I've always felt that sales and marketing are very closely aligned, obviously. But there is sort of marketing's there when the message needs to be there. Like, if there's something happening in the world, marketing messaging is key to getting the right comms out right in that moment. And to your point, the resiliency of the marketer is crucial today, now more than ever, with the rapidly changing sort of customer expectation and landscape.
The other thing I'll just add really quickly on that is I think the scope of marketing has changed pretty significantly. So if we think about old orthodoxies of marketing, it was top of the funnel, things like eyeballs, visits, kind of transactional relationships, not so much about engagement or brand experience. And that has really shifted. And I think one of the things, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but one of the trends we're going to see is that the experience of marketing has to go throughout the customer experience, has to go through the customer life cycle. And so marketing doesn't stop once you've captured them.
Absolutely. And kind of segueing into that, helping brands undergo digital transformation is definitely a daunting task, I imagine. However, with targeted approaches that you implement, this process can truly create valuable outcomes. The rapid advancement of technologies, personalization, and improved customer experiences, they change the bar for what customers expect, right, from brands. And I'll say this: being a father of two very young children, brands today that can offer that real seamless process, whether that's at a grocery store or something, ordering something online and having to return it, especially if you have the kids with you at a brick and mortar, they're the brands that they're repeat buys, they're repeat partners that I lean into. So on that note, with the changing customer experiences that you're seeing, what can we expect in the near-term future of how quickly sort of customers are going to expect always that brands just understand them and know how to serve them?
Yeah, this is the million-dollar question, right? What did you say? Sorry. Yes, that's right. I'd agree with you. I think the other thing is we are in a time of the world where, as a consumer, don't make me think and don't make me wait. And that is underpinning. And no one wants to say that because that sounds horrendous. But that is actually how we behave. And in our business, because we work at Salesforce, we're working with a lot of B2B companies. There's a lot of B2B, there's a lot of B2B2C, less so on the B2C side. But the challenge is that as a consumer, I don't care if you're a B2B customer. I don't care that this is your experience, because my experience as a consumer of anything is built on my experiences with Amazon or Uber or Airbnb, right? And so one of the things that I'm looking at someone in the audience here who's on my team, and one of the things that we talk about all the time is the Domino's Pizza Tracker. Anybody familiar with the Domino's Pizza Tracker? Right?
Yes.
How old is the Domino's Pizza Tracker? How many years ago did it come out? 7, 8? Anybody else? You raised your hand. Well, how many years ago? 5. Okay. The Domino's Pizza Tracker came out 15 years ago. 15. I was on the, I had to look this up, and I wanted to tap the person on the plane next to me. Did you know that? 15 years ago. 15 years ago, right? And yet every single C-suite I talk to in the B2B space references it as a visionary state. As a visionary state. You actually look shocked. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, so those kinds of experiences with companies, regardless of what role you're in, that is your experience right now. We don't always have the luxury of having the infrastructure underneath to drive experiences that we expect. So I think that's one change. The B2B, the blending of the B2B model and the blending of the B2C expectation has to catch up. That's going to be one of those things that as belts tighten could potentially be on the back burner, right? Maybe we don't want to spend enough money here, but that's the expectation. I want the same thing as a consumer in my B2C experience as I have in my B2B. When was the last time someone asked you to fax something? Happened to me this week. Like, seriously, we're still here. So that's one change. I think the other change is really going to be around changing mindsets of C-suites. And they have very different expectations than marketers and very different expectations than us as consumers. And so really making sure that we continue to educate C-suites, educate the business about the power of customer expectations, I think that's going to continue to be a challenge. And last but not least, when we think about customer experience at Salesforce, we can't divorce it from your employee experience. And yet I see it happen all the time. So banks are notorious for this, right? They make these solutions that feel super white glove and super concierge, and the customer loves it. And the person that has to deliver that at the bank or wherever is like, why am I on 15 screens? What's happening here? Why are they doing this to me, right? Because we didn't take into consideration that you can only drive a consumer experience if your employees know what they're doing with the technology and they are also engaged in the same way.
And you can take that sort of comparison to AI, right? Like the data in is what you're going to get out in the return. So I think having that like energized employee base to really believe in sort of the vision and also the product is going to translate and create even further value for the consumer at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, but it's also a double-edged sword, right? Because if we think about data, we all want personalized experience, right? If you ask us, do we want a personalized experience? Yes. And then you ask this follow-up question, how do you feel about it if I use your data in ways in which you don't know? Ooh, not so interested. Not so interested anymore, right? And so there's this really fine line that marketers are going to have to think through about what are you going to give me back in terms of an experience that is going to improve my life or my day or my kid's life that makes me want to separate with that data in a way in which doesn't feel weird or creepy. It is going to, and you can either make those changes now or you can wait for Congress to do it for you, but they are coming, and we have to figure out how do we have an exchange of value there that is in everyone's interest.
That's great. And wanted to touch a little bit on sort of that like executive leadership sort of component to your business, and as well as it applies more broadly to the marketing space. So at Wall Street Journal, research is core to our business, and it unlocks valuable insights for a lot of the brands and partners that we do work with. Each year we field the CXO Tech Agenda Study, which basically takes a look at what are the priorities for the C-suite over the course of the next year. Through that study, it's interesting and kind of leads to your point, there's some conflicts there. There's some C-suites that believe in priority A, B, and then there's others that believe in priorities C and D, for example, right? So when you think about customer transformation mindset and thinking about the CMO's responsibility in that conversation at that executive level, like give us a couple maybe examples or perspective around why it's so important to have that CMO in the room with the CIO, with the CEO, for example.
I don't know about you, but every C-suite I have ever been in is always super aligned around everything, right? Total agreement. especially the CFOs. It's just what can I do to help? I'm saying that in jest, obviously. Listen, when we looked across about 150 projects that my team ran, this is about 2 years ago, we said, what are the things that companies are doing? What are the mindsets that people are embracing that help them be more customer centric? And we narrowed it down to about 4, because this is continuously a problem, right? The CFO, the CIO, the CTO, and the CMO, who's generally not in the room, have a very hard time aligning on this. And everybody has a different definition of the customer. Everyone has a different definition of what good looks like. You get into the metrics conversation and people walk out. It's a lot of fun. Here's what we've learned. There's kind of 4 what we would call disciplines to doing customer centricity work really well. The first one is you have to build the business processes around it. Most organizations, because they're old and legacied and built on product, are not inherently customer centric. That's not where they focus. They are selling a product, not an experience. And when they start thinking about being customer centric, they do one of 2 things. One is they over-index so much on the customer that, as I've talked about, they leave the employee wondering why my life is all of a sudden so miserable in service of the customer. Or they do it the other way, and the employees have a great experience, but they have simultaneously made the customer experience miserable. So you've got to go through, these 2 things are attached. The customer experience and the employee experience are inextricably linked. And when we undo them, we do so at the cost of our customer experience. That's number 1. Number 2 is one team aligned around the customer. Or how we would think about it is, let me ask you guys, last time you called in for a service issue for something, who's done that recently? What'd you do it for? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, nonprofit or not, they still should have a better experience than that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have PTSD live as it's happening. That sounds horrendous. The other thing that happens when we sometimes make phone calls like this, where we're unhappy, or even when we are happy, is how many times do you have to do this? You tell the story, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then they say, great, I'm going to transfer you to customer care. Well, who are you? So, okay, great. So customer care picks up, do you tell the story again? You know what? This sounds like a technical issue. Please hold for tech. And right? And again and again and again and again.
Don't forget, most of those calls are all recorded, right? So there's no technology on the back end that's listening and maybe providing some sort of insights or readout to say, this is what the next person should be thinking about. But
right. And they all start with, who am I speaking with? Right? That's the worst. So when we think about one team aligned around the customer, that's what we're talking about. It's not that everybody has to have the exact same information at the same time. They have to have the right information for the problem that they are trying to solve. The role for marketers then is, please think about this as an opportunity throughout the customer experience, because I guarantee you most marketers don't think about those service calls as marketing opportunities when they are. But they also are marketing opportunities that can go really, really badly. How many times have you gotten off of a phone call with Moleskine and then all of a sudden you open your email and there's an email from them, 20% off your next Moleskine? No, not the right time. Not the right time, right? So we also have to have marketers think about that experience all the way through what we would traditionally not think about as a marketing opportunity. The service center, the call center, those are all marketing opportunities. You've got to make sure that you have the right information at the right time so that you can address what that customer need is, so that you don't really piss them off on the back end.
And so do you think, like from a CMO or the marketing org perspective down, is it almost like they need to try to approach the other C-suite members with, hey, these are the things that we're hearing on these calls, for example, or here are the pain points for some of the customers, and almost like regularly update these people about it, because it does impact the bottom line at the end of the day. And then ultimately, you know, your product is not selling, your services aren't being sold, and the feedback is that it's just not a good experience. So it's like, it's super important, it's very valuable, it moves the business, but at the same time, to your point, CMO is not always in that room and able to voice that opinion as often as
And you know who's not doing research? The CFO. Who's not asking what the pains are? The CIO, right? The marketing team are the humans of our organizations. They understand that. That is literally written into the job description. And so one of the things that I think our team is always surprised by is we have these customers that say, teach us how to do digital transformation, Nicole. Solve this big challenge for us. And then you say, have you asked your customers or your employees or your channel partners or your dealers what their pains are? No. Mm-mm. But we think, well, you haven't gone through identifying what those pains are because your expectations of the pains and their understanding of the pains are often very different. So one of the things that I think our team does really, really well when we do our work is we spend a lot of time doing research. I'll tell you a story about a cable company that we went and we were doing some work with them, and they were so excited to tell us about this application that they built on Salesforce. It was great. App made for them, put it on an iPad. It was amazing. It was going to totally change the employee's life. I said, that's great. Let's do a ride along. I'd love to see this in action. So we get in a car, we get into a ride along. Well, how do people fix cables? They climb up a pole with a huge iPad swinging from their belt. And the C-suite thought this was a transformational solution. And it was from where they sat, because they hadn't gone outside and done the research and said, ooh, actually, no, maybe we should have rethought that. Maybe an iPad isn't the right thing to have swinging from a belt. So this is all to say, yes, you have to do the work of understanding what the pains are, because otherwise you can't solve them. Everything else is conjecture.
That's great. That's great. And
there's 2 other transformation mindsets, by the way.
I would love to hear.
Okay, unless we want to go to the next question.
No, I think everyone would love to hear.
Okay. All right, the third one, and this is, it's going to sound slightly self-serving from the software executive, but is a lean technology stack. I know, surprise, surprise. I don't mean that everything in that stack needs to be Salesforce. I'm saying it needs to be connected to one another. Okay, so if you have an ERP, if you've got ordering systems, if you've got marketing systems, those things have to be connected, because you can't do the other 2 things I just talked about. You can't give somebody access to what is going on when they call Moleskine if they can't see the visibility of what has happened before they got there. You can't do that unless these things are connected, and you have to have a lean tech stack. Most companies, by the way, I just read this stat the other day, an average employee of a legacy company clicks how many times a day in different programs? Throw out a number.
3.
Where do you work?
Are
you using Salesforce?
Research is very important. We do use Salesforce for a little bit, but no.
Okay, no. Other end of the spectrum. Okay, I'll save you the pain. 3,800 times a day. 3,800 times a day. With an average of 40 programs. The incredible time suck that is pretty unbelievable. And then the last but not least is when we get really, really, really good at understanding what our customers want, it's because our customers are telling us. Who's returned something from Amazon recently? Similar experience to Moleskine, right? No. Why was it so easy for Amazon to do that with you? Yes, undoubtedly. Any other reason? That data point of you, what's your name? John. John, the data point that Amazon has just captured because you bought something, you had an experience with it, you didn't like it, you returned it at somewhere that was unknown to them previously. They just captured an unbelievable amount of information about you. And they're willing to do that because they will be able to mine that information to make decisions about John or anybody else in this room. So the piece of data that is driven off of these engagements and off of these moments is so much more powerful than just that one piece of data, because we're aggregating it and we're mining it. So when you get really good at this as an organization, Netflix does it perhaps the best, I'll tell you about that in 1 second, you understand that an experience drives an outcome drives an insight drives another experience, and it is a continuous circle. Really? 5 minutes, wow. Netflix does this really, really well. They're perhaps the best in the industry. Anyone know what the first show that Netflix produced was? Their own show? No. Yes. Who was the brainchild of House of Cards in Netflix? Was it the CMO? No. Was it Reed Hastings? No. It was the data scientist teams. So they're the ones that said the data is telling us we have an opportunity here that no one else sees. Give us $100 million, which he did, and we're going to give it a try. And all of a sudden, now you experience Netflix as it is. So when you get really good at this, then you get a data cycle and a data flywheel that will give you insights that you didn't know were possible.
And just from taking that leap, obviously $100 million to create a show is obviously for a media, for a entertainment company like that, I get it, it's in their realm, but I'm sure in certain businesses and different sort of atmospheres, when data is sort of the initial, hey, let's go do this because the data shows us this, I'm sure there's definitely kind of pushback. And I'm sure in the conversations you've had with partners, they might be a little like, really, we're going to go that route? And it's like, hey, the data's showing us this is what customers want. This is what employees are saying. Like, we got to take a leap of faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a hard and it's hard thing to know which data. And one of the problems we see all the time is companies are just out there collecting all the data. Not the right data, just all the data. They're just hoovering it up. And that's not helpful. You've got to solve a problem with the data. Otherwise, it will tell you nothing.
That's great.
Oh, you guys are here for me? Thanks. Thank you. Come on in.
So to kind of wrap, if you could just leave us with a couple of, pointers, 3 points for like the future outlook for marketing and just sort of from where you sit. We covered a lot, but I think obviously customer centric, employee centric as well is vital. Where do you think we need to be in thinking about for the next 12 to 18 months?
I would say that the word of next year needs to be flexibility and pivoting. I think the world is going to throw us some very bizarre curveballs, and the best thing that we can do is be open-minded to those things, especially in marketing, because you are going to be asked some very unusual things, and you've just got to be open to perhaps thinking differently about it. The other thing I would say is the B2B to B2C challenge. That is real. And there is a ton of money that is tied up in poor experiences for B2B businesses that marketers have got to start to help them unlock. And last but not least, the privacy thing. That is real, and it is going to become more and more important for organizations to be able to think through what it looks like to ask for data and what that value exchange looks like in accordance with maintaining the highest levels of privacy possible.
Thank you. So I would love to open it up if there's any last minute questions. I think we've got a couple of minutes from the audience. If anyone had any burning questions. Nothing.
Anyone in the back who just walked in want to just throw one out? Oh, good. Okay, so it's funny you asked that. This is from Zara, and one of the companies that I am most obsessed with this year is Zara. Not just because of the ostrich feathers, they help, but Zara is doing amazing things with data and driving real-time data decisions down to the level of their where they make their clothes, their factory floor, based on what you and I are putting into our carts in wherever it is we live. It is really a phenomenal case study in how to use data effectively to make real-time decisions. And it's from Zara. Thank you for asking.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank
Nicole.
you.